Welcome to the webinar for the Sport Auckland role, the CEO of Sport Auckland. My name's Iain MacGibbon from Farrowjamieson, and I'll be your MC today and talking to our two presenters, Lynton Campbell, who's the chairman, and Paul Dryden, who's the deputy chairman. And we're going to be talking about the Sport Auckland position and the involvement of yourself in that process and the sort of things that we're looking for. So just a couple of points on how the webinar works. You'll notice that on the top right hand of your screen you've got a little dashboard, and at the very top of that there's a little button, a bit like a fast forward button, that means you can expand or contract that dashboard. So you can move that to minimize it a bit so you can see more of the presentation. At the bottom of that little dashboard is a question box, and you can use that as an ability to ask questions, and they come up on our screen. We get an opportunity to pitch the questions to the presenters and get your response, hopefully, that you're looking for. If time permits, we will try and get through as many questions as possible, but I apologise in advance that if your question isn't answered, it's probably just the time pressure. Also, during the process, we're going to do a couple of little online polls. They're quite simple, and your computer screen will become an active poll, and we'll ask you to vote on various issues, and that should help gain whether or not this has been a useful process for you. So it should take us about 30 minutes or so, and if for some reason you drop out or the broadcast connection for you doesn't work, it is being recorded and it will be available on our website tomorrow morning after about 9:30. So firstly, let's introduce our presenters. Lynton Campbell, as I mentioned, the chairman. Welcome, Lynton.
Thanks, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone.
And Paul Dryden, the deputy chairman. Afternoon, Paul.
Hi, Ian. Welcome, everyone.
So what we're going to look at firstly is, after introducing ourselves to these two charming gentlemen, who you now get a chance to actually see, we're going to start the process of looking at the overview of Sport Auckland itself. So perhaps if we could start off, we've established the vision, Aucklanders leading active lives. Can you talk a little bit about the beginnings?
Sure. Sport Auckland is a not-for-profit organisation. It's a charitable trust. It was formed over 20 years ago. In more recent times, Spark was created in the early 2000s from the findings of the Graham report, and the government, through its agency Spark, indicated that some of its aims in the sport and rec area were similar to those of Sport Auckland and other regional sports trusts throughout the country. So as we developed what we were doing in helping Aucklanders leading more active lives, we partnered Spark and other agencies in delivering programs and trying to obtain similar outcomes. And as well as Spark, we're often mistaken as the Auckland branch of Spark. We are regional sports trusts are not. They are completely independent and obviously contract with other organisations. In our case, probably the major other two people we contract with are the two of the DHBs in the Greater Auckland area, and obviously with Auckland City Council.
Lynton, has the whole structure of regional sports trust since its inception been reviewed at all in terms of how effectiveness, whether there are changes to the structure or the network?
I think only within each RST. In other words, because each RST, I use this term RST, it means Regional Sports Trust. There are 17 throughout the country. I think each RST is entirely independent, and so the only one that would review them as such in terms of their effectiveness is themselves. But having said that, because these government agencies contract with us, they want to ensure that we are fit to deal with and have responsible structures in place to to assure them that they, say Spark, is going to get outcomes from the funding they provide. And in fact, quite recently as last month, Sport Auckland was put through what's known as an organisational development tool, an ODT, by Spark, the aim of which was to establish whether Sport Auckland was set up and structured and had the right processes to
governance structures,
staffing all the way through.
So that's a tool that Spark are using throughout the RSTs, actually.
Throughout the RSTs, but also regional sports organisations, and several other areas, because if you don't have sustainable good practices in place in these organisations, they have a tendency to fall over, and the outcome of that is that the sporting recreational public is let down by failures within a club structure or the local regional structure or even the national sporting organisations, and those national sporting organisations have also been put through the ODT. But getting back to this ODT, we, Sport Auckland, came through that with a pretty high mark, suggesting that we are well structured and well set up to achieve what our goals are, and those goals in some cases parallel with Sparks, and because of that they're happy to fund us on a 3-year contract, bulk funded.
I was going to say, I'm sure, knowing the propensity of Spark to measure things, that there was going to be a benchmarking of some sort out of this process.
Yes.
And you've mentioned...
And quite rightly, because, they're tossing in a lot of taxpayer money, we need to be accountable for that, and we are.
And you've mentioned, obviously, passing some form of threshold to enable you to get towards bulk funding, so we can perhaps talk about that in a little bit. If we look at the second part, which is looking at the present, can we look at the overview? Still have the same vision. What's the current situation?
Well, there's been quite a bit of change that we're going through from a policy perspective. When the national government was elected, it re-looked at its approach to supporting sport and recreation across the country. Spark itself elected largely a new board. There was some continuity, but largely a new board with a new chairman. They then announced a new strategic plan. These all happened mainly last calendar year, but a number of the initiatives or outcomes that Spark want from its strategic plan are being introduced now through adjustments we're making in what we're doing at Sport Auckland, and a prime example of that is the Kiwi Sport program, which is relatively speaking for sport a huge amount of money, but with the government pretty clear on where it sees that money going, which is out on the sports fields and not in the offices, and so there's a fair amount of accountability to see that those Kiwi Sport programs are introduced through the Sports Trusts, being the agency that they've chosen to make that delivery through.
So if you go back to the fact that they're saying, okay, Spark's introducing bulk funding, so they're actually saying, you've passed this threshold, we think your processes are good enough, we'll give you the money to on-fund, and you have to have a process to report back and show that that's been, the process is robust and auditable.
Yeah, and that's correct. But as well as that bulk fund, there's a separate fund, the Kiwi Sport Fund, which is in addition to that, which they also want to see us flow the money through us to the schools and clubs that are eligible and that apply and qualify, without us clipping the ticket on that part of the fund.
So there's no administrative component taken out of that?
No, the administrative component is built in, if you like, to the bulk funding. We need to do that out of the bulk funding, and so some of the bulk funding that was for projects that were fledgling, say Kiwi Sport, have come out of those fledgling programs and having to be channelled into this into the administration of the Kiwi Sport program. And we've got another unique challenge to sport and rec in the Auckland area, and that itself is the Super City that's commencing later this year. We see the Super City as presenting opportunities rather than problems for us, and we are advancing those opportunities by meeting along with the other regional sports trusts in the Auckland area, meeting with ATA, which is the Auckland Transition Authority, and we are providing them with solutions as to how Auckland City, both politically and at an operational level, how Auckland City can deliver its social responsibility in the sport and rec area. And obviously we're competing with arts and culture and all sorts of other people, but we seem to be held quite responsible in what we've done so far in meeting with ATA, and the feedback we've got is that we've been very helpful to them in providing them with answers and opportunities for them rather than problems for them, which most submissions
most of them are at the moment. Just to get that right, so there is no compulsion, because of the Auckland Super City thing, there's no compulsion for the RSTs to do anything other than still be RSTs. So this is a proactive stance of saying, is there an opportunity for you to actually...
Absolutely. That's what we just see that,
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make, is that the 17 RSTs around the country, as Lynton said earlier, completely independent organisations, although most of them have very strong relationships with their local council. So in this instance, with the 4 regional sports trusts in Auckland, currently operating in alignment with the various councils, then with the new Super City coming in, it makes sense for there to be some discussion going on around that. But the regional sports trusts remain and will remain, and as we've said earlier, the funding for Spark remains in the same structure as it is now. But we do have a formal relationship with the other regional sports trusts, and we're doing a lot of work with them.
Probably answers a question we just had about, under the Super City, will the 4 RSTs work collaboratively together to avoid competing against each other to achieve efficiencies? And the answer to that is a large yes. We are doing that. We have an organisation of the 4 Auckland RSTs referred to as the Regional Sports Trust Alliance, the RSTA, which is another. There's someone
who's on to that.
Someone has come up with a question that's on to that.
Is the RSTA going to work?
And look, that's an extremely good question. I and Sport Auckland say yes, we want it to work, but parochialism will see that in some cases some RSTs might feel they are losing their autonomy and might want to do patch protection, and that's just the challenge that the CEOs and chairs of the 4 Auckland Sports Trusts are working on a regular basis and have been more active in that in the last 12 months than the previous 12 years probably.
Okay. One of the questions there, which is reasonably penetrating as well, is about whether or not a review of the organisational structure and performance has been taken wider than Spark in terms of the other stakeholders.
Well, I would say that there's been no demand for that, and I think we've been busy getting on with doing what we do. I think as part, we as part of our strategic plan setting, which we're about 80% through developing our next strategic plan, following on from some of the changes that I mentioned earlier on. We've looked at our organisation and structure and looked at how that measures up against some of the reviews that have been done of us, principally by Spark, and said we're not doing too bad, so let's not panic and let's get on with the business and not spend too much time reviewing it.
I think it's an important point here that the board, which we represent, is very much a governance board. We're there to ensure that the Regional Sports Trust is operating within its objectives. But from an operational perspective, the CEO and the team are there to run the business, and business opportunities that arise are going to be investigated and seen in the proper light by that team, and the board is not necessarily there to do that, but we'll always be there to provide support.
We've got some other questions coming in, so we can come on to that in a minute, but let's just perhaps move on just a little bit and try and get an idea of those that you do engage with. I mean, where do you draw the influence, and what sort of people do you engage with?
Well, it's really across the wider community, and that answers perhaps some of the questions as well in terms of revenue opportunities and the business operation itself. So as Lynton has already said, we do have some actual relationships through contractual relationships, and that is the likes of the district health boards with things like green prescription, and that is going through some change as well, whereby green prescription did sit under the Spark umbrella, but has moved now more to be under the health vote. So there are some changes in the wind there as well, but we currently have a team operating green prescription, and there's been some significant successes in that area. We have our contract with Spark, as we've already talked about. We have a contract with Auckland City for developing and delivering certain programs, and we have relationships with regional sports organisations, bottom right there, regional sports organisations, and that is really a relationship which exists in whatever capacity both parties choose it to be. There are many instances that Sport Auckland has been involved with consulting and assisting regional sports organisations either with their strategic objectives of their own or some challenges that they may well have, and there are a number of examples of that have been undertaken by Sport Auckland. And we obviously have existing relationships with the other regional sports trusts around the country.
And you mentioned some of those brands which people would know of in terms of Kiwi Sport in particular, and one of the questions was around the Kiwi Sport program and how that's evolved and its effectiveness as a program. I mean, what's your view in terms of locally as opposed to nationally in terms of Auckland?
Well, it's interesting, the Kiwi Sport as a program. I mean, it's something that the directive about it was go out to your community and consult and see what they think will work best to get more children involved in organised sport. That consultation process took 4 or 5 months. The cry from the community was, we need more people to organise us, more coordinators. We reported that back to Spark, who said, well, I'm sorry, the funds aren't for employing people, they're actually things happening on the paddock. So we had to do some manoeuvring there, because on the one hand the community said that's what we want, on the other hand the government said that's not what you're getting. However, being innovative people, we've got an arrangement now where we, Sport Auckland, in our particular area, are employing or about to employ 2 sports coordinators. But to answer the specific question, this process has taken an inordinately long time because it involves consultation and buy-in and so forth. And so, as far as I know, not $1 of Kiwi Sport has actually hit the deck yet, and it was announced in August last year.
Yeah, today there was the first funding round.
First funding round meeting today
Auckland,
for Sport Auckland. So yeah, we can't tell you how successful it is yet.
Green prescription may not be as well known. My understanding of that is that effectively a GP can move, obviously the word prescription is used deliberately there, can move from and saying just instead of pills I can divert you to someone who will assist you in exercise and health going through.
Yep, that's it in a nutshell. And our people pick up those green prescription clients and marry them up with support groups for a period of time. And I noticed one of the questions was, how do you measure what happens there? Yeah, we do keep tabs on them to ensure they keep active, but what we are finding is that a large portion, I don't have the statistical information, but a large portion of them are going back to their family and friends and whānau, and have impressed on them how successful this program has been to their health and well-being, and there's been sort of buy-in from other members of the family whānau. So without even having green prescriptions, those other people have benefited. Hard to measure, and I don't know the statistics of it, but I do believe we do have some information about the success in that area.
Okay, just to sort of show you a little bit, can we launch a poll at this point, just to have a look at your screen will show you now the poll, and by no means is this used in any form of selection, we're just interested. What is the key attraction for you in applying for this role? And if you just click with your mouse and let us know about whether it's your love of sport, working towards a healthier population, or the mix of skills required, we'll just be interested in your response. And you're rocketing through that quite quickly. Thank you for giving us some indications. As I say, we're not measuring you on it. Thanks for those who've done that. I'll just let the last ones come in. Thank you. And 100% goals. And I'll just show you in there the poll result, and effectively showing 56% on the mix of skills and 24% on working with a healthy and 20% in love of sport. And it probably indicates the eclectic nature of this role as well, because you are dealing with all of those sorts of issues. So thanks for that. If we look at moving on to the business overview now, can we focus a little bit on the current focus and direction for Sport Auckland?
Well, there's no question that this whole, the national government and their refocus on sport and their redirection of Spark has had a massive impact on Sport Auckland and on the other regional sports trusts around the country. So that has been a major focus from a business, from an operational perspective for this whole calendar year. And we were due to review our strategic plan anyway, but it obviously has given us a chance to look at what the new Spark strategic plan is got as its goals, as well as obviously the situation in Auckland being the new Auckland Council. So we are in the middle now, and as Lynton was saying, we're nearly completed our strategic planning exercise. We've got an external group assisting us with that, and what's being delivered is a very simple, user-friendly, easy to work with strategic plan, which covers a purpose and vision, strategic drivers and objectives, and some of the key success factors and some of the challenges. So the full staff have been involved in working on that strategic plan, so they have complete ownership of it. It obviously ultimately is the board's strategic plan, but in this instance the staff have been very heavily involved, especially in looking at the success factors and the challenges that are required to move towards that. So there's no question the organisation is going through a review, which is partly forced upon us through the changes from Spark, but also because we would be doing this as an actual process anyway. So there's been some questions about potential structural reviews and the like, and so there's no question that the new CEO will have an opportunity to work with the board, but to work with the existing team and to look at the operational and organisational structure and review that, and perhaps start with a new structure looking at the various aspects of the business.
There's been a couple of questions that all come down to the same sort of thing about fundraising. So can we sort of clarify what everyone they think they mean by that, and obviously what you guys think by that? So what is the situation in terms of raising of funds?
Well, there's currently a current structure which people will have been able to see through the annual report and through other means, and some of those are contractual, and that's a chosen direction with the likes of Green Prescription, the likes of the contracts with Auckland City, and now the contracts with Spark. So they are a major part of our business operation. But we don't have a fixed view on the total aspect of the business for Sport Auckland, and so there is an opportunity to grow the business and look at other business opportunities.
Yeah, in the past we've been virtually entirely reliant on contract income. We have not been in recent times a fundraiser at all. We've had a couple of named sponsors, but they've been in kind rather than in cash. So if you look at our annual report, you'll see that at least 99% of the income has come from contracts and not from the CEO out knocking on doors trying to get corporate cash. We're not saying that in the future there isn't some room for innovation in that area, but it hasn't been a priority in the past, and but something we're not averse to looking at.
Okay. If we look at the current team, can we get an idea? You've talked about the fact that it is a trust, so it works in the trust. Can you talk about the composition of that trust? You mentioned that it changed.
Yeah, well, shall we start at the top perhaps, and we have a board. The board of trustees is currently 6 people with a range of business skills. The board is not elected, and it's one of the points we didn't score very high on our ADT because we had a view that we were better served by working out what skill sets we needed from board members and going out and finding those people and asking them if they would volunteer their time as trustees, which they kindly did. Our current board has a couple of chartered accountants, a lawyer, and some people with health contacts and people with other business contacts. So we have a broad range of skills at the board level. We then, in our organisational structure, have a CEO, and then we have 3 or 4 senior managers and a bit of staff below them. Remember, if you've done some research on this, you'll know that we are not a big organisation in staff numbers. What we tend to do for manpower is to contract that as and when we need it. So our permanent staff sits around about 12 or 13 or 14, somewhere around there. Lots of other people working for us from time to time on a contract basis. We think we get more value with our money for that. So going back to our staff structure, then it's a flat structure of 3 or 4 senior managers and some support staff for them. I have to say the board is considering changing that structure where the CEO may well be a more strategic role and a networking role, and that we may be looking at some sort of general manager as a 2IC. It's more involved operationally with staff structure below that. That's not set in concrete, but we would very much like to discuss that with that type of structure with the new CEO rather than lumber them with it before they are engaged.
I'm sure these very bright people will bring something to the table in terms of some advice about structure.
I hope so.
And now let's look at the role itself. I'm sure some of you who might have seen it will recognise this in terms of what we were trying to attract, and the person specification. Now, if you go through this and you've got all these, you may now walk through the door and take the job. What we're looking for is, as I've discussed with a few people in this role, and I can think if you guys could comment on this, it's quite an umbrella position. It's not a single discipline in the sense that it's so multifaceted. You're engaging with central government, you're engaging with local government, you've got stakeholders, you've got sports organisations. It's a more arms than an octopus type of position, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a very challenging, very interesting position. I think it does require a multi-skilled person as it presently sits, and we've been fortunate in the past to have people with those skills in the role, and we think there are people out there that would rise to the challenge of having those skills and I'm sure amongst the candidates there are some with lots of ticks in those person specifications that we'll be eager to talk with.
Sorry, Paul, you were...
Oh, no, I was just going to say that it's a relatively unique space in terms of it's very much in the not-for-profit, which is a terrible description, but not-for-loss or not-for-profit sector. But it crosses over, as Lynton said, the sport and the health sector. And with the unique characteristics of Auckland, then you've got your local government scenarios as well. But certainly it's an ever-changing landscape, and that's really the opportunity that exists now. And it's a massive time of change in this region, and there's a real opportunity to come in. So, you say, someone with those skill sets, it's a great opportunity.
And I think the easiest way to describe not-for-profits is the ability to move from strategy to licking the stamps in the space of half an hour, really. I mean, often you've got that multifaceted. Good question about the style of both of you in terms of how that impacts, and therefore how the Chief Executive engages with both of you in a formal way as well as an informal way. How do you see those relationships running?
Well, we've, as the chairman for the last four years, I mean, I've had a very good working relationship with the two CEOs that I've dealt with. We have a contact me whenever you like policy. We tend to have at least one face-to-face meeting between board meetings, and obviously we have a board meeting generally once a month. But the board, and particularly the chairman, is there to support the CEO, enjoys supporting the CEO, enjoys the successes and the good stories that we hear. So, that's how we work. We work closely, but I certainly don't get involved with the operational stuff. That's the CEO's role. Get on and do it. You won't get instructions from me as to how to go about doing things. I'm happy to share the experience, but not tell you what to do.
And as the incoming chair, I don't intend to change things a lot. I mean, we all have skill sets, and that is, as Lynton said, is the reason we're on the board, and we're looking to always either represent our stakeholder groups or the various skills we have. But we're obviously always available for the Chief Executive as required with the specific skills we do have. So there will be times when we can get involved, but as I say, that's on a request basis, not on a push basis. But very much a monthly board meeting, which is a governance board meeting. There are obviously financial imperatives, and also constantly reviewing the strategic plan. But outside of that, we're there to govern, not to operate.
Most impressive. You stick with that philosophy. The CEO's got a good run, I would have thought. If that's the case, then what you're saying to me is the CEO can engage with you to make sure they've tested the waters and then present something that's been pretty roundly discussed. So the nature of those meetings and then the impact, the budgeting for that, is that set in stone annually, or is there a flexibility in terms of if you can attract some more funds we can get it, or is it pretty much on an annual basis?
Well, certainly the financial control is done by way of an annual budget that's set at the beginning of the year, and it's quite a robust process to budget what the expected expenditure is to run the organisation and where the income's coming from, and we tend to budget for a break even. We're not there to essentially raise money just to have in the bank. We have a policy of having at least 3 months operational costs as work in progress, as working capital, should I say, and we currently meet that. So,
what is that roughly annual turnover of business?
I would say it's over 2 now.
Yeah, with the new Kiwi Sport.
Yeah, you've got the extra bits.
Yeah.
And in looking at the sorts of team, you'd expect this person to come in and then put their own view in terms of the structure that you've currently got, and then put up a proposed, yes, this is fine, or no, I'd like to see this different structure.
Yep, we're happy to discuss that. As to say we have some views that we think from our recent experience suggests what we should have, but we want to be able to discuss that with the incoming CEO before we move on it.
There seems to be a lot of work here around relationships and talking about engaging at various levels. So, and you intimated that when you said that maybe there's room for another operational position underneath this. So you really do see this person out as being the face for the organisation, engaging with the council, engaging with Spark, engaging.
Engaging with stakeholders and at the delivery end to the schools and the clubs, not so much the clubs, but the regional sport organisations and that. One of our strategic goals is to continue to be a centre of influence for sport and rec. So we're a go-to place where people, no matter what part of sport and rec they come from, whether they come from an organisation or are individuals, we're the sort of first port of call for information about their sport. And we've found in the past that has worked well towards our vision of Aucklanders leading more active lives.
One of the things that people may or may not be aware of is that other sports organisations share your premises, or you have subtenanted to other organisations. So what's the rationale for that, and what's the impact for the business?
It's not uncommon for regional sports trusts to have what is loosely referred to as a sports house, and we took over a lease of a large part of the main grandstand at Alexander Park as the sports house for Sport Auckland, with room for tenants where other regional sport organisations could put their offices in, share the facilities of photocopies and ITs and phone systems and reception, and also share by networking with other similar organisations on the same building under the same roof. And we think that that's largely been successful, and we're happy with our decision there.
Again, for those who don't know, the actual location of Sport Auckland is just on the top of the stand at Alexandra Park. It's got the most spectacular view of all the parts over there. So, but there must be a vibrancy in having other sports organisations there as well, that everyone can sort of share issues and get things going. So.
Yeah, I'm sure around the water fountain there's a lot of decisions made.
Someone's asked whether that's fully tenanted at the moment. Is that a revenue aspect for that as well?
There is a revenue aspect for that. It's not our area that we lease isn't fully subtenanted. There is room for a couple more organisations there, and from time to time there are ongoing discussions about who wants that and who's coming to it, but there's still availability at the moment.
But it's certainly done as a cooperative venture, so the idea is to have the organisations there. It's certainly not a profit-making exercise. It's more important that it's a large gathering of like-minded sports organisations. So
cross-pollinating.
Cross-pollinate is a lot of, as Lynton said, around the water cooler. So the aim is to have as many of the regional sports organisations hosted there as possible.
And that wasn't always your home?
We did rent offices at Eden Park prior to that, and prior to that we were up in a building in Kaiwa Pass. Eden Park at one stage was our preference to set up a sport house there, but it didn't appear to be in the World Cup restructuring of the stadium there plans to have facilities available for us, and so we decided to go otherwise and signed a lease that gives us stability where we are.
And great access to airports and everything else as well.
Yeah, pretty central for Auckland, as in the Auckland city area, for our stakeholders.
Okay. In terms of looking at the other aspects that we have defined, we've got measures of success. So are they going to self-regulate these, or what's the feeling of the board in terms of the CEO being able to develop some of the KPIs?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, part of the strategic plan that we're working on, one of the challenging bits at the end, once we've worked out our objectives and our our various plans will be to say, well, how do we know we've succeeded? And so we will be establishing some key performance indicators and some other outcomes that we want to achieve. We'll need to establish a starting point, and then we'll need to be able to see whether those outcomes have been achieved, not just in the next 12 months, but going forward. This is an ongoing process. It doesn't finish on a particular day of the year. It carries on, and we're following our vision for a long time, not just in monthly or 12 monthly cycles. It's a holistic look at what we're trying to achieve.
So one of the first objectives would be for the CEO would be to complete the strategic planning round, which is developing at the moment. I think halfway through-ish in terms of the strategic.
We're more than halfway through. We would like to sort of hold up the finalising of it to involve the new CEO.
Excellent.
And get a buy-in from he or she, so that they felt part of that plan rather than, oh God, I've been given this document and I have to achieve it and I had nothing to do with setting it up.
Which is exactly one of the questions that someone's asked, which is, so would I have an ability to come in and influence? So yes, you would, is the short answer.
Yeah.
If we look at those factors, then what we've got is somebody who could come in, have a contribution to the strategic planning process. There's continuity in the board of trustees, with the chairman and the deputy chairman being involved, and probably fair to say that there's a reasonable state of flux external to this, but not inside the role, and that this is a stable organisation that's doing a good job and continues to do so.
Well,
the flux is out there, and the sort of.
We think so. I mean, obviously we are biased, but because we think we are successful, we believe we are, and let someone tell us we're not, and we will defend our position. But there's always room for improvement in this area, and a new CEO, it's a great opportunity to make their mark in this exciting sector, really.
And the time frame of that strategic plan, in terms of not doing it, but it's actually, is it over a 5-year vision?
It's a 3-year.
Yep.
But it'll be the strategic plan is really just a map to get you started on, and we will all be reviewing it as we go.
Okay. We'll come back to some final comments. I'd just like to get a little bit of feedback from the candidates who've logged in. If you wouldn't mind giving us an idea of whether or not attending this webinar has been of any use for you, and therefore if you could just vote and click on those, give us an idea of whether you've gained something from the process and being involved in it. So before we wrap up, sort of any final comments that you'd like to make in terms of the process?
Look, I'm just really looking forward to meeting the short list of candidates, because that's what it's going to come down to.
Yes.
And working a process through with you to select the one that we think will best fit that role, and working with you. I think there's some great times ahead, exciting, challenging, but not too daunting in my view, but certainly really something to get your teeth into and have an influence on, which will be really good.
Superb. Thanks for that, everybody, and I'll just show you part of that. The reality is that one of the benefits of using the webinars is that people can self-select. They can go through this process and actually say, this isn't for me, and that's what somebody's done through this process. So that's actually considered to be a bit of a win. But obviously the rest of you have gained something from it. We appreciate that. Paul, any final thoughts in terms of?
I can really just echo what Lynton said. I think it's an extraordinarily exciting time in the greater Auckland region and for Sport Auckland within that sector. And as we say, Spark and the national government have come up with some new challenges for us and for sport in general. So I just think it's a wonderfully exciting time for a new chief executive to come in. And as we say, it's in some ways a blank sheet of paper, in other ways there are existing contractual commitments that are there. but we offer the new chief executive really an opportunity to take the business and grow it and take it forward.
Okay.
There's a question that Iain's asked me to answer, and that is the outgoing chair still going to sit on the board?
Yes, he is.
We've all taken a vote here. Time is of the essence, right?
I am available to help the transition, and we will see how that goes, but I'm not off in a hurry anywhere. I don't have to go anywhere. I just think it's time for a change, and so yes, I'll be available.
Just to give you each a bit of an idea of the next steps. Those of you who missed it or want to review some of the information, this webinar will be available on our website tomorrow morning by about 9:30. We would encourage you to look through, if you haven't already, the Sport Auckland website, and I'll be in touch with you. It may not be by tomorrow, but it certainly would be by Thursday, just to discuss taking your candidacy further or not. And the bar, because of the quality of the people that have been involved in this, the bar is going to be set pretty high, and I think there's going to be some very stellar candidates. So we expect you to have reviewed this information and be prepared to contribute. As I say, the webinar will be available, so we would like you to review that so that we don't need to discuss these at interview. Apologies for the people who couldn't get to all of the questions, but time is of the essence. We wanted to run it reasonably crisply. And I'd like to thank both Lynton and Paul for making time tonight to be able to convey it. So everybody, thanks for your efforts, and we wish you all a good night.